Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Harding. Welcome you back to the Power Mode Yacht Podcast. Today, star-studded crew for you guys, joined by Senior Editor Chris Dixon and Senior Editor Captain Owen Burke. What's going on, guys?
Greetings, Dan.
Hey, Owen, welcome officially to the team and to the Power Mode Yacht Podcast. Say hello to our millions of listeners around the world.
Thank you very much, Dan. I am elated to be here. Hello, everybody.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, today we are continuing a series on stories behind the stories. We're going to dive into talking about our October issue that we just sent to the printer on Monday. And it's a little bit for you guys, it'll be an issue preview. For us, it's a recap. So I'm trying out a new word here with the October issue precap. It's, but before we jump into that and we really get into some of the exciting stories behind the stories, I want to thank and give a quick word from our sponsor, IMTRA. When headed out on the water, there are a few things more important than everyone on board experiencing a comfortable and stable ride. Zipwake dynamic trim control systems from IMTRA offers just that. Using state-of-the-art sensors and fast-acting interceptors to keep the boat trimmed properly and reduce the roll from waves. A significant upgrade from slower-moving, manually controlled trim tabs, Zipwake offers systems for almost any boat from 16 feet to 110 feet in length. Visit imtra.com to learn more. All right, gentlemen. Now, I know the stories, these issues, we're not supposed to have favorites. They're kind of like children, but we're gonna have to pick some. We're gonna have to pick some of our favorites anyway. And I thought we'd start with the newest member of our team. Owen, you recently got your feet wet on the new North Coast out on a fishing trip in Rhode Island that seemed like a great way to kick things off. Do you mind telling us a little bit about that mission and how that story came together?
It was a great way to kick things off. It took a little legwork at first, finding the weather window to get offshore and fish, comfortably with a camera is different from just getting a weather window to fish.
Sure.
So, I think we had about 3 tries before we got it together, and I had like a day and a half notice, so I got JT on board and packed a bag and headed up into Friday, New England summer traffic, headed for the Cape. Um,
Good start.
so, got in a little later than had hoped, but managed to tour the factory
Mhm.
ahead of taking the boat out. Yeah, cool little spot. It ended up being, I think, more of a profile of the builder and
Mm.
sort of this small outfit kind of breaking into new grounds with a larger boat, which is, what translated, I hope, into a feature rather than a sort of new boats column.
Sure.
You know, we got fishing. The owner, the builder, had not even put blood on the deck of his boat yet, so I ended up being the first one to catch a tuna on it, which was pretty cool. I tried to get him to be the first, but finally acquiesced as the drag was spinning
Yeah,
and
yeah.
one too. So that was great to see a smile on the guy's face.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I love the fact that anytime you're able to use the boat the way it's intended to be used, this is a a Bristol, Rhode Island built. It's a very nice boat. I mean, it looks like a lot of luxury accommodations and touches, but at heart, is it fair to say that this is a serious fishing boat?
It is, a fishing boat to me personally, and I think Joe the builder is an
Mhm.
open boat, a very humble thing. I'm primarily an inshore fisherman when I fish, and
Mhm.
here I am with augmented reality and air conditioning and seakeeper, and so
Yeah.
hard to not get a little blinded in the light of all those things, but yeah, it's very much a fishing boat. It's a very comfortable fishing boat, but still a fishing boat at heart.
I guess so much we could talk about in terms of your experience or the factory, but just give us a couple quick impressions of the boat.
The boat is kind of like a modified down east, I would say, with a bit of a picnic boat feel. Even in the hull, I mean, it's got a rounded shape to it, so it kind of gets on plane really easily. It cruises really easily, but then it's got four Yamaha 300s out back, so it moves. I mean, I think we hit like 50 knots on it. We cranked out there. Fast boat, comfortable boat. I think as with any hull number one, it could stand a couple of tweaks here and there, but
Sure.
really comfortable, really fishable, great boat.
Nice. Well, remind readers it was so not only was it kind of a last second hustle out to Rhode Island, but what time was that wake up call to get out there fishing?
Let's see, the wake up call, I think it was 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, that's kind of tuna fishing, especially on those grounds. You want to get that first light bite and that was it. I mean, the bite was done just after sunset. There were a few people hooking up around us, but really, I mean, we did everything right, or sunrise.
Yeah,
We did
yeah.
everything right at sunrise.
Well, I think that's I was so jealous that you guys were going out on that boat. You know, my son Caleb was, I think, being born maybe it was like the week after, so I wasn't able to make that trip with you guys, and I was so jealous that you were go tuna fishing and blast out. When I woke up at 6 and realized you guys have been out up and out there for 4 hours, I was definitely less jealous. I was happy that you were having a good time. So it's a great first feature. And a lot more to come. So thanks for pulling that one together.
Here's hoping. Happy to do it. More to come.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Definitely
sushi, sushi right there on the deck on your first feature for PMY. Not bad.
not a bad day in the
No
office.
complaints.
That's awesome. Well, and speaking of no complaints and speaking of pretty decent assignments, Chris, you tackled our cover star this month in the new Azimuth Sea Deck line, and that included also a last second jaunt over to Fano, Italy. Not the easiest place to get to, but also not, I gotta be honest, not a terrible assignment if you can get it.
Damn right. Yeah, no, it was a great trip, and yeah, short notice. I when I got to Fano, I actually flew into Venice and drove to Fano, which is a town I'd never been to, on the Adriatic coast. It was beautiful and just a fascinating place, and it's an ancient walled city. And I went in for a pizza, then walked into a gift shop next door to see if I could find something for my wife, and asked the guy in the gift shop, "So how old is this town?" And he's like, "Oh, it goes back to, I think, zero." Like, zero, not like before zero or after zero, but zero, which was, hilarious. And so it was really an interesting juxtaposition to get on this Azimuth CDEC 6, it was really something. It's a 57-foot, what they're calling sort of a conscious boat is what they're sort of calling it. And, you could say that was a, kind of a glib term because
Mhm.
everybody's trying to be conscious these days. But I mean, there's a lot behind this boat in terms of how it's built, the materials that are used, and then also the power management technology on it. So it was fascinating.
Well, we're gonna jump into a little more detail on that in just a second, but it seems like why this boat was also a worthy cover star. Azimuth is an absolute Italian giant, and
Yeah.
they already have a lot of different model lines, and this one, you're right, is definitely their most, I say, aggressive, progressive in the field of sustainability, which is it's certainly having its moment, just in the world, but it's really having its moment now in the yacht space, and we're seeing different degrees of it. Some people, are throwing some lithium ion batteries in there and calling it sustainable, and it's a little bit hard to stomach when you see a boat, with a fuel burn in the hundreds of gallons and saying it's sustainable. But I gotta say, with this line, I guess, Asma is really taking some big steps into kind of walking the walk. Can you tell us a little bit about, the materials and what makes this boat more sustainable?
Well, there were several things, and it's funny because you and I back and forth on this, but when I was writing the feature, it was like, okay, am I going to write? How much do I write about my travel to Fano, which was just a fascinating town, but there was so much on this boat that I'd not seen before. And so that obviously really sort of ended up taking center stage in the story. I mean, you have most of the materials in the walls are plastic composites made out of recycled bottles and fishing nets. And I mean, we're talking about not just a few plastic bottles or a few pieces of fishing net. We're talking about, a boat that weighs tens of thousands of pounds so it's got, I think they said 20,000 plastic bottles equivalent are used in the boat, and then recycled fishing nets, which we know are a huge problem. So what a great way to utilize Boy and Slat's ocean cleanup project, to put this stuff back in the water in a much more usable form. The boat also had Google AI Assistant for controlling systems on the boat, including the climate control. The Azimuth folks spoke to the boat in Italian, and the air conditioner came on, and it replied in Italian, which was funny. The SeaDeck line, there's 6, 7, and 8, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe 9. But the six relies on a straight diesel IPS setup for its propulsion. The other boats that are coming out in this line are actually going to be diesel electric drives. But the thing that made this a mild hybrid, and a really interesting mild hybrid to me, was all the power flowed through the battery system. So if the power is going to go back out to the climate control, it's going to come from the batteries. If the power is going to go back out to the Seakeeper or the helm, or any of the other systems, it's going to first come into the batteries. So there are four electric supplies for those batteries. One is plugging into shore power. One is the alternator on the motor. So you can use the alternator without having to even rely on the generator, as long as you're not making too big of demands on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is a variable speed generator as well. So there's 4 potential ways that this boat's power systems can be supplied, but it's all coming via the lithium system, and it's really easy to monitor. Like I was just super impressed with how sort of customizable it was if you wanted to geek out on the power management, which I know a lot of people are getting more interested in doing. But it was also easy just to let it run in the background, and that was something that the Azimuth people talked about, which was, their consumers and the kids of those consumers who are just more concerned about sustainability are driving a lot of this, and people are just way more educated about the electrical consumption of their boats, and where that electricity is coming from, and how much power the systems need, and that sort of thing. The Azimuth folks said, the consumers are just so much more educated, and are demanding more efficient solutions for keeping the boat powered and comfortable. It was really interesting. And the boat drove great too. It was a joy to drive. It was so quiet on the inside. I couldn't believe it.
And that's such an interesting point, and I wanted to touch on that because that comes across in your piece. So it's in, a lot of boats, you might say, all right, this is kind of a sustainability sideshow project. But this boat, everything I'm gathering that you've reported on, is every bit an azimuth, right? They're not cutting corners. It doesn't feel any lighter, doesn't feel any cheaper. I mean, it sounds like it really was to the high azimuth standard. Fair to say?
Yeah, for sure. And I'd add too, there's the hull itself is GRP layup for, just shock absorption and toughness. And then a lot of the underlying structure above the water line, above the hull line, is carbon fiber. So they really, they've given a lot of thought to where they're putting their composites in the boat as well. It was really something.
No, it was an excellent piece, and absolutely worthy of our October cover. So excited for people to get to read that. Thanks,
Yeah.
Chris.
Thanks, man.
I'm gonna kick it back to you for a second. This North Coast was your first feature, but you're kind of bringing a fresh perspective to the magazine. Were there any other columns, departments? What stories stood out to you that you maybe enjoyed as an editor reader?
A handful stood out that I reread over and over again, but I think the one that left me thinking the most was the In Our Wake column by Chris. That Johnson P series. It gives you pause, makes you reflect a little bit. I mean, how reliable those early outboard 2-stroke engines were, and vis-a-vis where we are now. It's do we really want to be plugging a computer into our boat to diagnose the thing? And when I was 13, I'm no mechanic, but I was taking the cowling off my 2-stroke and breathing life back into it. I'm not going to do that with these 4-strokes we have now. And here these things are winning a war like almost 100 years ago. I'm going to keep looking for the least teched out outboards I can find. I can tell you that much.
I think there's certainly a contingent of our readers that would agree with you, and I agree. I mean, I just think the in our wake section, I think Chris is doing a great job, and it's got a real, it always has a nice feel of nostalgia by definition, but yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it is amazing. It is a relatively short amount of time that
Hmm.
these outboards have jumped. Unbelievable. You look at that, and that was the motor of the day to the Mercury 600s we're seeing today, and it's you know what they have in common is they're both engines that go on the back of a boat and they use fuel. I mean, it is evolved so fast and so different today. That's a really great point.
No
One
doubt about it.
one piece I wanted to give a shout out to is Bill Prince's Inside Angle column. So this, which is kind of a
Yeah.
counterpoint. Bill always has such great opinions, and as an active naval architect and designer, he's got his finger on the pulse. He actually challenged the current state of electric propulsion. He was pointing out some of the limitations of the diesel outboards, and certainly some of the hydrogen experiments that we're seeing out there. But I think it was a really interesting counterpoint. We do a lot of coverage on future types of propulsion, right? I feel kind of a duty to that. Our name alone has power and motor in it, so I think these emerging technologies need to be reported on by us. But Bill kind of had a point, a really good argument to say, fossil fuel is still the fuel of today and probably the fuel of tomorrow. I gotta read just one section that stuck out to me that really it had me laughing. I read this piece maybe 3 or 4 times, and I think I laughed every time. He wrote, "Diesel outboards are here now, up to about 350 horsepower if you don't love the smell of gasoline vapors in the morning. Thus far, your choices for diesel outboards 300 horsepower and larger are limited to Cox and Ox. Are multiple Ox then oxen? What about several Coxes? I should stop now." I mean, Bill, I love this column because he brings his typical humor and to the subject, but also makes some really great points. So definitely thank you to Bill Prince for another great column. And now a quick word from our sponsor. Imtra is a 100% employee-owned company committed to bringing the best-in-class products, expert product knowledge, and unparalleled support to the entire marine industry throughout North America since 1952. Kicking it around, there's so many different ways we can go here. I'm torn, but I think Chris, I gotta give you one more shout out here. This is kind of like the Chris Dixon issue. I think at last total you penned 25 plus pages of the magazine,
Wow. Holy crap.
and yeah, which is really incredible. You did a great job. But the
It's been
funny thing
fun too.
is, no
That
matter,
helped.
despite you contributing so much, you're actually my second favorite Dixon who contributed to this issue. Your daughter Lucy, a rising journalism student and established boater in her own right, contributed to our waterfront column. And I'd rather have her on here today, but I think she's out traveling, so you're gonna have to do me a favor and maybe a little backstory about Lucy and her piece about taking a women's boating course.
So I got alerted to this women's only safer boater course from a guy named Chris Collins, who's a buddy of Shannon Scaff, the Coast Guard rescue swimmer that I profiled a while back in
Mhm.
Power Motor Yacht. And I encourage anybody to listen to the podcast that I did with him because he's just an amazing human being, Shannon. He said, well, want to make you aware of this Women Making Waves course that's offered by Safer Boater. And Safer Boater is mostly obviously coastal concentrated, but it's all around the US now. And they offer really hands-on on the boat comprehensive safety courses. And this would be a weekend long course for Lucy to take that covered everything from, right of way, marker buoys, things that you just really need to know on the water, knots, docking, driving, all the things that if I'm out there on the water trying to teach her to do it, she's rolling her eyes because it's her dad.
Of course, of course.
And I think that that's probably, and that was why the other women, I think, maybe also took the course too.
Hmm.
She ended up having a tremendously valuable experience with this course because it wasn't just classroom. It was all these things that she really wanted to be better at. and then with a bunch of women, and most of whom were older than her, most of whom had, significant others, and they had their own boats, but they also wanted this, the ability to learn this stuff in the presence of other women and other women captains, who really
Mhm.
knew their stuff. So I love the piece that she wrote. She got a lot out of it, and I would definitely encourage anybody to look up Safer Boater and look up these women making waves courses, because they're terrific. And I mean, she's just, I'm proud of her too. I mean, she's a budding journalism student, and here she is getting published in Dad's magazine. No, no nepotism, no nepotism.
No, she really did a tremendous job, and I think kind of our handshake agreement, which she was working on in the story, is it that her and I were going to get to work on it together, and treat her as every bit a regular contributor would. And yeah, you should be proud. She's got a bright future ahead of her.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. So, I mean, guys, there's so many other directions to go into. I guess, we have a little bit of time here. Chris, can you give, I don't want to give too much of your Wanchi story away, because to me it's one of those great, what we like to call surprise stories. It's a lot of history, so many characters, and such a real deep dive on a sport fishing capital. But go ahead and give readers just a little bit of the Wanchi's flavor, please.
Sure. Dan and I back and forth a lot on Wanchis in the wake of my visiting Ricky Scarborough for a feature in Power and Motor Yacht. I spent a lot of time with Ricky driving around the town and getting his version of the town's history. The more he's showing me, the more I'm just like, whoa. I mean, this little peninsular town south of
Mhm.
Manteo, between the mainland and the Outer Banks, the quantity and quality of boat production, particularly in the sport fish realm, is just second to none. I mean, there's no place that's that small on the map that's turning out that much. With the help of people like Charles Perry, who's a well-known guide and author from that area, and Sonny Briggs and Ricky, and just a host of folks there. I hopefully, and the help of the Outer Banks History Center, they helped us a lot with images.
Mhm.
We ended up with what I hope is a really interesting piece on how this place came to be.
It's Yeah, well said. I mean, it's a really great reported piece, and I hate to say it like this, but the photos were just as good. I mean, the photos were really, it shows almost like the In Our Wake piece in what is really a relatively short amount of time, a handful of decades, how things have just quantum leaped into the future. It was I love, I feel like we're doing a really nice job in these issues, paying homage to the past and future, and I think that combination really helps this issue.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to write, and the conversations that I got to have
Mm.
just made it. I mean, it's such an interesting, colorful bunch of people who call that area home.
That's a great point. Guys, there's so much else we can dive into, but I think that was a great taste of the stories behind the stories. Just I want to give a quick mention to just some, not all, of the other stories that we have in here. And it should be noted, when we did a final read on this issue, it took the better part of a day to get through everything. And I love that about our magazine. We don't, a lot of magazines are going really into short form, quick hit stories, but we're staying the course with our dedication to long form storytelling, and hopefully you have a month's worth of reading materials. A couple of the other things I was talk about my column a little bit, but this was a really fun one for me. I talked about the how I got to bring my parents to work with me for the day. I brought them to the Palm Beach Boat Show, and that was a really interesting twist and really interesting perspective. Thankfully, it was kind of an event that makes you a little nervous, but ultimately nothing to be nervous about. I had a really great time showing them a little bit of taste of what I do for a living. We also had Michael Rybovich with another really gripping stem to stern. We have our new boat section, which in many ways is the bread and butter of what we do, and a great mix of boats from a great mix of writers. We had the Iliad 53F, which is a brand that's relatively new to the US, and that was penned by our colleague, editor-in-chief of Yachts International, Kenny Wooten. We had a review on D. Antonio's new day yacht, and this again is not so new to the US, but it's a brand I think that's still on the rise in terms of recognition. That was penned by editor-in-chief of Soundings, Gene Craig. And last but not least, we kind of had I would say a surprise one in a composite CY46, which is a boat. I'm gonna be honest, I found this boat on Instagram and had some really stunning photos. And I was like, how do I not know about this Maryland built boat? So one of our new contributors, Victor Tan came in and did a really thoughtful review there. So thanks to him for that. We also previewed the new Hinckley Picnic Boat 39. Mike Smith comes in clutch with another great column, this time about how to move your boat up and down the coast, whether it's hiring a captain or how to hire a truck. And that's a really important piece. A lot of people think about trucking their boats, but you got to beware. Not all services are created equal, and there's a lot of horror stories out there. So if you're considering trucking your boat, please give that a close read. We also have just a couple last ones. We have a very interesting piece from our electronics editor, Ben Stein, who installed not just a Seakeeper gyro, but the new Seakeeper ride system, all on his 22-foot boat. As far as I know, this is one of the few boats that have retrofitted both upgrades. So he offers a really interesting perspective on what those projects are like and how the two systems work together. And then I guess, one of the last but not least, Diane Byrne, longtime Power Motor contributor, did a great piece on behind the making of the glass that we see on yachts and super yachts, like just these enormous slabs of glass. And there's so many questions about them, about their strength, how they're made, how they're installed. So really great behind the scenes piece there. And that and so much more in October issue. I hope you'll take the time to subscribe if you don't already at pmymag.com/subscribe. Guys, any other closing notes as we quickly make the shift onto November?
Onward and upward.
Yeah, go ahead, Owen.
No.
Nice. What do you got for us, Chris?
I was just going to say, I found again, this kind of contrast between old and new, like we were talking about the Tilts glass factory. They have these super high tech methods of making these massive panes of glass, but how do they inspect them? With a loop that you would have used to examine 35 millimeter slides, that are up in your attic. It was an interesting piece for sure.
Yeah, it's cool. It's just a really nice mix this month. That I really appreciate all the help and everything you guys did for it. And I hope you look forward to seeing that issue in your mailbox sometime soon. We're gonna close out, which is a quick word from our sponsor, Imtra. For a user-friendly, fully automatic trim control system at an affordable price, look no further than ZipWake system from Imtra. With nearly 60,000 systems in use worldwide and hundreds of boat builders installing them on new builds, ZipWake is proven to offer a more comfortable ride, peace of mind, and fuel savings to boaters around the world. Imtra's full-time team of product experts are available to answer any of your ZipWake questions, so visit imtra.com or give them a call to get started. Just a quick personal aside, I've been on a lot of these new boats that come equipped with ZipWake and even older boats that have had them retrofitted, which is a really kind of cost-effective, time-effective upgrade you can make to your boat. And it's really a seamless system. It's amazing how it works so well behind the scenes, especially in auto mode. And it really is just, we talk a lot about how things have evolved over time. Once you have a system like this, the idea of going back to traditional trim tabs, it really feels outdated. So it's a product I've used a lot and really enjoy. So that's it for now, guys. Well, let's get back, enjoy a little time on the water and get back to work on November.
Cool, man.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.